Hey everyone, this is Ash. You're watching Ash on Comics. Here are some comics. Let's get into it. This is a review of Unexpected number 2. So why do I have number 1 here? Good question. Unexpected is a comic that I feel has a really apt name because it was unexpected. And it's a comic that, for a lot of people, the first issue didn't go over very well, and I can totally understand why. It feels really rushed. It's, how do I say? It's kind of that choice when you have a new comic. You can either just go out with, all your guns firing and just try to get some action and try to get maybe apathetic readers to be like, ooh, exciting, fun. Versus the other approach, which is maybe take a longer time to build up, get some characters involved, but then risk losing those type of readers who are like, where's all the action? We're on issue 6 and nothing's really happened yet. So this comic has taken the former approach. And I've been watching other reviews, which I really like to do. If you have a video and you do reviews, I will be happy to come over and watch. Put yourself down in the comments. Tell me where you are. One person I saw reviewed this and they didn't like it because they didn't care about the characters. And that's a very fair assessment. You have no reason to care about these characters because you don't know who they are. The only person you have any idea of is this girl here, Firebrand, because they talk a little bit, like 2 pages. They give her this quick, super quick summary of who she is. Not really an origin at all. So you kind of, okay, I kind of know her. She used to be like an EMT, whatever. You still don't know much. You don't really know her personality. You don't know her as a person to care about her. But you know absolutely jack about these 3 guys. So when the action's happening, you don't know who the villain is. You don't know who these guys are. It's like, okay, a bunch of action. And then there's all this gobbledygook stuff about Nth Metal. And if you haven't read Metal, which I haven't read, I'm guessing this stuff is in there, some of it. But then you're lost. You're like, what's even happening? So it's with that. I gave this a semi-positive review because I take that into consideration. I was a reader of Marvel's New Universe way back in the day, and that was a comic experiment, kind of like this New Age of Heroes, except they were a completely isolated, an isolated universe that didn't connect with the Marvel universe, and that was its big mistake. It took the other approach that I mentioned, the latter approach of like, let's have this long character build-up, and a lot of people, I think, that's probably the number 2 reason the new universe failed, because you'll be on issue 10 and you're like, okay, what's going on? They took a long time to build these characters. I don't necessarily mind that. I read comics. Who the hell says comics? I read comics for the long form. X-Men is what got me into comics. Chris Claremont was a master of the long form. I want my stories to go on for years. When I was younger, in my 20s and stuff, I would go back through my long box. I have a collection of almost the entire Claremont run, not dating quite back to Giant Size number 1 in '94. Those comics right around that era are way too expensive. But in the early hundreds, 100 and teens, all the way through the entire Claremont run until Jim Lee spun off with his book and then ultimately jumped ship to Image. I collected all those, and every several years I'd go through my long box, pull them out, and just read that entire epic over again, and it was so awesome. It's great when you have a title like that, and you can go back, like, let's say Unexpected 2 years from now. I want to be able to go back and start from number 1 and read this great long story. It's kind of hard in the beginning. You got to pay your dues. I'm hoping Unexpected does that. So why do I have both books out here? So when I read this book, I was okay, yeah, I see, I'm not really understanding, but I as I explained, I was just giving it the benefit of the doubt. I was like, okay, it's fine, I don't understand, I'm not supposed to understand, let's wait till issue number 2. Then I read issue number 2, and I was not following along. I was like, I don't understand what I'm reading. This is not making my head spin, but it just didn't make a lot of sense. I was like, this narrative is not easy to follow. So I got through the whole book, and I thought, I can't do a review on it like this. Like, I don't even understand what I read. So I went back and read Unexpected #1. And very interestingly, after reading this, even though I didn't fully understand it, Unexpected #1, I enjoyed this much more because I started to understand a little bit. The picture started coming in clear. It's like when you're building a puzzle and you just start with a few outer pieces and you don't have a clue, but then you kind of get like a quarter, a third of the way done, and you can, it's like, oh, I can see what the picture is going to be. That's kind of what was happening. And this book is about this character, Neon the Unknown. So I think what's going to happen is this book introduces Firebrand. This book talks about Neon. Well, actually, let's just pause that because I don't even know if we're going to get to learn about these characters. So I read this book again, and I was like, oh, okay. This is making a little bit more narrative sense to me. Then I went back and read this book again, and I enjoyed this book better because understanding this book helped me to follow the story of this book. Okay, that's really long-winded. I take up over half the time just getting to this part. So before I start, I want to point out one thing. This last page. In my last review, I talked about this page, and I really like this page. I didn't understand the page. I'm like, okay, whatever. Don't understand what's happening in the story too much. All we know is the characters say, you need to, because if this world is broken beyond healing, if this universe dies, you'd hate to see where it'll be buried. And then you get this awesome, badass looking, I'm assuming it's a villain, right? So I'm like, oh, scary. Okay, cool. That's compelling. I want to know more. It's a good, like, little cliffhanger there. Not a cliffhanger, but a good, like, oh, wait till next issue. Detonation Metal. Okay. So now that we remember where this comic left off. Unexpected #2. Neon the Unknown will avenge the dead. Okay. So we're starting off. Neon is using his abilities to zap the characters. He can sort of, he can shape mortal substances, whatever mortal substances are. I'm assuming just, you know, any sort of physical substance like metal, wood, stone. But apparently he can also do people and souls, whatever. It's not fully explained yet, but that's okay. He can reconstruct them. And he talks about he can only do it to create, never to destroy. So that's a limitation of his power. And it's a pretty cool limitation for a hero character. So anyways, he's using his ability to warp them out of where they were. We see this exchange between Firebrand and Neon about what's going on. I need answers, yada, yada, yada. So does the readers. And we get this little flashback scene. And just like they did in the first issue with the big Firebrand, here's who that person is. They do the same thing with Neon the Unknown. You get a really brief synopsis. He used to be this artist, and he was just shitty, and he, you know, probably begging online for a sandwich. But then something happened. He had some sort of inspiration. He got all this acclaim, and he became a superstar. And like you'd expect, someone of that low character becomes a superstar, ends up squandering it and indulging themselves, which I appreciated that the writer could do that. You know, that's really cool. I don't think an SJW would write a comic this way with that sort of self-awareness. So I applaud the writer. It's Steve Orlando. And he talks about he gets to a point where after he indulged himself, he lost all his inspiration. So he went to other sources because he did not ever want to go back to being the scum that he was. And of course, look, he makes, you know, essentially a deal with the devil. He says no cost was too high. And of course, when you make a deal with the devil, you always lose. He got a glimpse of the World Forge, which I don't know much about. I'm assuming this is all metal stuff. I really got to go. I do plan on getting the metal trade. Comic cost the lives of all of his friends, and he says he's been paying for it ever since. The fires of creation let me bend mortal materials to my will, like oils on a canvas. They can be used to create, never to destroy. He talks about getting a new group of people to balance the deaths of his previous followers. To balance the deaths of my followers, I sought to help new, unexpected allies, also seeking redemption. So he's trying to redeem himself. That's a good character trait. I like the fact that he starts off as a bad person. He realized this. He's lost everything. We should despise him. And it's fine. You can. But this character's on a journey of trying to redeem himself and saying, look, I realize I'm an idiot. I was a bad person. So now I need to go do something spectacular and great to redeem my wrongs. I like that. Characters need that. It adds dimensions and depth. So, again, back to the present. They're arguing, and he's kind of explaining some things. I don't want to spoil the comic, so I'm skipping by some of these details for you. I'm not here to just... My goal isn't to just read the comic to you, but to give you an overview of what's happening in the comic so you can understand if this is something that you might be interested in, or if you've read it, you can kind of follow along and see if your opinions match mine, or see if maybe I possibly could give you some insight that you didn't... Not insight, but a different perspective, you know? That's one of the reasons I like watching reviews, too, is just because sometimes people see things from a different angle that I did, and it helps me appreciate a book in a new way. So, we're going along, and we've got the main villain, this guy, Lord Sin, which is a cool name, man, Lord Sin. I wish they wouldn't do the whole spell the word different. We know it's supposed to be sin, like, that's Lord Sin. Just say S-I-N. I don't know. Then his general, his right-hand guy is this General Fade, which you'll see is this girl. And her ability is, I'm a person who is both here and not. Okay, great. You fade. So why don't you just call it Fade, F-A-D-E? I don't understand. But whatever. That's just a little pet peeve of mine. So she's on the case now. So basically this is the Lord Vader. This is the Emperor, right? So she's got to get this medal that the previous guy failed. Bad Samaritan, a.k.a. Quench. And that threw me off. Oh, I gotta tell you, man. One of the reasons when I was reading this book, I did not remember that this guy was referred to as Quench. So his name is Bad Samaritan. So when they started in the book, they were going back and forth, and sometimes character would say, oh, Quench this, da-da-da-da, or Bad Samaritan this. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, these are two different people. But I couldn't remember who Quench was, and I was like, this doesn't even make sense. And like one time they mentioned his name is Alden Quench or something, and I'm like, it's the writing for the trades thing, I think. Because, yeah, they should have re-referenced in this, they should have at least had one little line somewhere, Alden Quench, a.k.a. Bad Samaritan. Or I don't know how you'd write it, but somewhere, if a person jumps in on issue number 2, you're going to be lost. And I was lost, even though I read number 1. So, there's this guy, which I think is one of the Batmen from Metal, the Dark Knights, I think. If you guys know more than me, please let me know. But this little line kind of confused me at first because I didn't know who this character was. I'm like, is that Man-Bat? Says, tell me, Superman, what shall we engrave upon your tombstone? And she's sort of like investigating the crime. It's almost like she kind of senses the past. This is not really happening, but it's sort of her feeling, what had happened in the past. So I'm like, why is Superman referenced? And I was like, okay, well, this is probably a character that had dealt with fought with Superman, and it's somehow related to this story. She's sensing the properties, Bad Samaritan, and I'm like, this has got to be a Metal thing. And I was like, I think there's a Man-Bat version of Batman in there. So I'm thinking that's him. That's where I'm going. I'm probably wrong, but who knows? So then we go back into space with Lord Sin, and I was happy to see these little guys back. I thought in the last issue, I think I made a comment, I really like the design and the look of these guys, and then he just kills them. And I was like, oh man, that sucks. Like, I think you could do something with this character. And I was like, oh, there's more, sweet. So maybe we can have a spin-off, character who's one of these guys. You hear that, Olant, Steve? If you're watching this, which I'm sure you're not, but these guys, cool. Okay. So these guys are Manhawks. I was just talking about Man-Bat. There's Manhawks, apparently, which make me think of Hawkman. Another thing that's probably in metal that I don't know about. It seems to me very much that the guy we saw on the last page of the first issue is this guy. Maybe I'm wrong, but there's nothing in this book else to hint that what we saw was not just a Manhawk. And when you see the Manhawks in here, they're basically chumps. And I was like, what? If that guy on the last page was just a Manhawk, that's really disappointing. You made something look so awesome and badass, and then it's like, oh, they're just little henchmen for this guy. So here we are back in the present. Neon has warped them to his special abode. The Sanctum Sanctorum is what it looks like. This guy reminds me of Doctor Strange for some reason. I don't know why. But he's obviously not. Even though his powers are semi-mystical, he's not a sorcerer. He just, I don't know, he walks around with a staff and stuff. I don't know why. Just, you can judge for yourself. So Fade has tracked them down, and since she's not there, she's able to cloak all of her little minions, and so the heroes are unaware. She uncloaks into reality, I guess, and they attack. We get a little fight scene, and we find out that Neon's not really much of a fighter, and Firebrand is doing all the fighting, and he's kind of a coward, actually. I don't want to say a coward. He's full of self-pity. So he's got this whole attitude, oh, I should have stopped Quench. You take the medal. I can't fail again. And she's just like, enough. Snap out of it. Start fighting, you idiot. Do good. Again, which I liked. You don't want to see the characters in this position, but it's important for characters to be in this position so that they can overcome it. Overcoming adversity is what heroes do. Sometimes that adversity is themselves. So we get this girl-on-girl fight here, and it's alright. I like a little comment here. She calls her a lava lamp. Fight scene kind of goes on. She wants the stone and the conflict engine. She ends up killing the girl because she goes out of control. Her conflict engine apparently fuels her anger, so she's got kind of a Hulk issue that the rage builds. Not the whole super strong thing. I'm just talking about the Hulk rage as he gets madder and madder. So they're like, oh shit, went too far. Yeah, let's get out of here. So he makes a portal to the run, and then this panel happens. I've gone over and over this panel, and I cannot figure out what's going on. So we run. Moments later, door. I told you Bright Marshall was the only safe God Garden. Sorry, let me read that again. I told you Bright Marshall was the only safe in the... Damn it. I can't read straight when I'm reading out loud. I told you Bright Marshall was the only safe in the guard... F it. I don't know why I can't read all of a sudden. I told you Bright Marshall was only safe in the God Garden, Elig. If only you listened when I said not to trust the Viking judge. So we see someone pick up this axe, which is Viking Judge's axe. And at first I was like, okay, she's like kind of grabbing it on the way out. But this door is not that, and obviously it's moments later, so this is like after that. Someone picking up an axe in a scene. I have no establishing shot. I just see a hand. And I get, okay, that you have to, scenes like that. I just wish there was a little bit more to this scene instead of it being confusing. You can still be mysterious. You can have a bigger frame and have a shadowy character so that we know, hey, look, if this is a person we're not supposed to understand, at least convey you're not supposed to understand it. Instead of saying, am I supposed to understand this? I don't know if I'm supposed to understand this. Because in the next scene, Penn City, and it's conveying that, they go Penn City, Vanity, Ivytown, National City. They're just bouncing all over, I guess, trying to hide their trail. And then they come to Slaughter Swamp, so that was a cool name. They got this Nth Metal, that piece that we saw created in the first issue. And he's basically kind of explaining, like, look, this is super powerful, and I can't destroy it, can't do anything with it, it's immune to his powers. The only person that maybe could have done something is dead. We had Viking, Judge, and Orc, who they left behind are dead, and that's why I said I don't know if we're going to get an issue 3 and 4 about these characters, because it would have made sense, issue 1, let's have a little micro origin, issue 2 micro origin, issue 3, 4, but these guys are out of the picture already. Weird. So apparently Ascendant, the blue guy, his race are called Orcs, O-R-C-K, and they live hundreds of thousands of years, and they're this ancient beings or whatever. I don't really know much really more about them, but they know how to use this as a power source, so they're hypothesizing maybe they know how to stabilize it. Unfortunately, I think Elig, if I'm pronouncing that right, Elig, was the last of them. It's making it sound like they're kind of implying that. Oops. So they teleport to a person that I guess was a contact of Elig's on Black Hawk Island. It's this girl, and she's a mechanic here at this airport. She's got this robot from the 853rd century. And I thought this was really interesting. I'm June Robbins, AI Specialist Science Survivor, former Challenger of the Unknown. And I like that, because I like that they're bridging the mythos for the new age of heroes, because Challengers is one of the other books. I also like it because I'm reading Challengers, and as far as I know, you don't get to retire from being a Challenger of the Unknown. You're dead. And you get to pause your final demise for a short time until whatever power sustaining you runs out, and then you're fully gone. But in the meantime, you get to be a hero for a while. So I don't know how she's former. That's cool, though, because it makes me wonder. I want to see that mythos explored now. Makes me like Challengers more, which is probably my least favorite of the books I'm reading. So they're like, oh, okay, Elig mentioned you. They assume that she's his student, and she corrects him and says Ascendant was one of my students. And if he's dead, God rest him, there's a lot to talk about. Yay, Superman. We can start with the danger. And then the book closes with the darkness, and we see this image kind of forming in. And it's, I've reached the destination site, I found Samaritan's body, he's quite dead, blah, 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 blah. Sadly, there's no one who can save him. And then this face is, dun, 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 Mr. Mystery Man. It's got to be him. That's the conclusion I have. One could, Alden Quench. Your work is not done. So that's pretty cool. If he is who I suspect, if he is one of the Batman, I like that, they're being incorporated. And Immortal Men features one of the features the Batman Who Laughs. So if you've got these big villainous powers from this other dark universe, and there's multiples of them, and each of them kind of they're the villains essentially of different books of this new age. I think that's a good way to kind of connect everything. So, sorry for this long review. I'm glad you put up with me. Sorry for that bumbling word balloon reading. I don't know why all of a sudden it's like on camera, you just mouth doesn't work. Unexpected number 2 made me like Unexpected number 1 better. Unexpected number 1 made me like Unexpected number 2 better. This book has a lot of potential. I think it's paced too fast. That's my only problem with it, is that it's really just, it's pushing the envelope too fast to try to crank out this story before readers tune out. And I think the problem with that is that's a good way to just readers to tune out. So that's the only issue, but I think if you give it a shot, if you take your time reading this, I am guilty of this, where sometimes I just get into reading mode and my eyes bounce from word balloon to word balloon, and you just boom, 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 you're reading, and your eyes you stop paying attention to the pictures, or you just give them this cursory glance just so you can understand what's happening. Don't do that with this book, or both of these books. This is really written with beats in mind, meaning like a song, you have a certain pacing. Stop with each frame, give each frame time, read it, digest the picture, move on. It'll take longer to read, but the book will flow better. It won't feel like it's just cramming down your throat super fast, too hard to swallow. And understand that it is a bit complex if you're reading it. It's not that it's complex, it's just because it's so fast-paced, the details are hard to decipher because it doesn't put enough detail in it. I think this book will slow down ultimately. I think they're trying to get to that first 5 or 6 issue arc. That'll be the first trade. And then I imagine it'll slow down to a more normal pace. But so far, this is my number 2 book. This book, it didn't wow me, but it impressed me from the standpoint of, my curiosity's piqued. I now want to know what this book is going to become. I'm very curious. This guy's interesting. The whole mythos of this nth metal. This is the only book so far, a little bit of the Immortal Men that delves into that metal universe, from the pages of metal, and builds that mythos and makes me go, I want to know more of what's going to happen. So I hope you like this book. I hope you'll give it a chance. If you're still on the fence, I hope you'll keep following my reviews. I hope the book continues to improve. And if so, maybe you'll give it a chance in trade paperback. I'll continue to try to do my best to give you a good overview of the book and what you can expect. But this gets a thumbs up from me. Move the needle. If you do check this book out and you get it because of my recommendation, please let me know. Tweet me. Ashon Comics on Twitter. Tweet Steve Orlando. And I hate that they put this in the back. The artist is Carrie Nord. Let them know that you bought this book because either A, you liked it, or because B, someone recommended it to you. And remind DC and other publishers that we want good comics without social agenda and propaganda, and we're way okay with diversity. Look at brown-skinned people, girls, you don't see anything but just humans and people, and it's not about race. And you can be diverse still. This is how you do it. Bravo DC. Thanks for watching, guys. I will see you later. Bye.